A man in Miller's Creek thought a monster was stalking his quiet farm. Something huge, silent, and dangerously bold. The townsfolk whisper about a strange animal, hungry and dangerous, prowling near their homes. It had the shoulders of a lion, a twisted gait, and it didn't run. It just stared. With Halloween just hours away and children preparing to trick-or-treat, the town is in a full-blown panic. Rumors were flying about a 6-foot beast snatching livestock, and the sheriff was on a high alert. A wildlife specialist rushed to the scene to neutralize the threat. But the fear instantly turned to heartbreak. What they found wasn't a monster. It was something that left them absolutely speechless. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The wind that swept through the valley of Miller's Creek that late October carried the crisp, dry scent of fallen leaves and the impending promise of winter. For Beavis Miller, a man of 74 years who lived at the very edge of the tree line, the silence of the season usually brought a familiar, aching comfort. Since his wife, Martha, had passed 3 years prior, Beavis had let the farm go quiet. The cattle were sold, the fields leased out to younger men, and the barn stood as a hollow cathedral of dust and memories. But this week, the silence had been broken. It started on a Tuesday, just as the sun was dipping below the jagged spine of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Beavis had been on his porch, nursing a mug of black coffee, when he saw the movement near the old oak stump at the perimeter of his yard. It wasn't a deer. The movement was too fluid, yet strangely labored. It was low to the ground, heavy and tawny. By Thursday, the sightings had become more frequent. The creature was bold, lurking closer to the house than any wild animal should. To Beavis's failing eyes, it looked massive. A hulking beige shadow with a twisted gait. Friday morning, Beavis drove his rusted pickup truck down the gravel road to Kendy's Corner, the only convenience store within 10 miles. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his arrival to the smell of brewing coffee and floor wax. Kendy, a stout man in his 40s who knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves, leaned over the counter. "Morning, Beavis. You look like you haven't slept. The rheumatism acting up?" Beavis shook his head, grabbing a carton of milk. "Ain't my joints, Kendy. It's that beast. I saw it again this morning. It was drinking from the rain barrel by the shed. It's big. Real big." Kendy frowned, wiping his hands on a rag. "You sure it ain't just a coyote, Beavis? Or maybe old man Miller's stray dog?" "I know what a dog looks like," Beavis snapped, his voice rising. "This thing, it's got the shoulders of a lion. No tail to speak of, just a nub. It walks with a limp, dragging its back leg. It looked at me, Kendy. It didn't run. It just stared." A hush fell over the 2 other customers in the store. "A mountain lion?" Mrs. Gable, the town librarian, whispered from the magazine rack. "Here? I thought they were extinct in these parts." "They come down from the high country when they're hungry," Beavis said darkly. "And this one looks desperate." Kendy's face went slack with worry. He looked at the calendar on the wall behind the register. It was October 30th. "Beavis, Halloween is tomorrow. The kids. We've got the hayride planned, and the trick-or-treating route goes right past the turnoff to your place." The realization hit the room like a cold draft. A predatory cat, potentially injured and hungry, prowling the edges of a neighborhood full of children running around in the dark. "I can't take the risk," Kendy said, reaching for the landline phone. "I'm calling the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. If there's a cougar stalking folks, they need to know." Beavis nodded grimly. "You do that. I've got my shotgun by the door, but I don't move as fast as I used to." By the time the sun began its descent on Friday afternoon, the panic in Miller's Creek had fermented into a full-blown uproar. Rumors fly faster than crows in a small town. By noon, the story was that the lion was 6 feet long. By 3 o'clock, someone claimed it had snatched a calf from the farm down the road, a claim that was entirely fabricated, but no one checked. Beavis sat on his porch, his shotgun resting across his lap, watching the tree line. He felt a heavy burden in his chest. He didn't want to kill anything. He had spent a lifetime raising animals, and he respected the wild ones. But he was old, and he was alone, and the thing lurking in the shadows felt like a harbinger of something terrible. Around 4 o'clock, a green SUV with the state emblem on the door crunched up his driveway. A woman stepped out. She looked to be in her late 30s, with hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and eyes that looked like they had seen too many difficult winters. She wore a vest that read, "Wildlife Rehabilitation and Rescue Specialist." "Mr. Miller?" she called out, keeping her hands visible. "I'm Dr. Lena Harris. Kendi called the station. Said you've got a mountain lion problem?" Beavis stood up slowly, his knees popping. "That's what it looks like, ma'am. Big, tan, limping." Dr. Lena approached the porch, her gaze scanning the property. "We've had no confirmed cougar sightings in this county for a decade, but transients do happen. If it's injured, that makes it dangerous. It can't hunt normal prey, so it goes for the easy stuff." "Like me?" Beavis asked dryly. "Or pets, or livestock," she corrected gently. "I'd like to take a look around. If we can tranquilize and relocate, that's the priority. If it's aggressive..." She didn't finish the sentence, but her hand drifted to the tranquilizer rifle slung over her shoulder. They spent an hour walking the perimeter. The autumn leaves were thick on the ground, making tracking difficult, but Lena found prints near the barn. She knelt, examining the mud. "These are distinct," she muttered, frowning. "The pad is wide, but the stride is short. Very short." "Is it a lion?" Beavis asked, gripping his walking stick. "It's a feline, definitely," Lena said, standing up and brushing dirt from her knees. "Let's check the barn. Animals often seek shelter when the weather turns, especially if they're sick." The barn was a cavernous structure, smelling of old hay and sweet rot. Beavis flipped the switch, and a few dusty bulbs flickered to life, casting long, eerie shadows against the wooden stalls. "Stay behind me," Lena whispered. They moved slowly down the center aisle. A rustle came from the last stall on the left, the one Bevis used to keep his prize mare in years ago. It was deep in the shadows. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the air. It wasn't the roar of a movie monster. It was a sound of pure, defensive terror. Lena raised her rifle slowly. She clicked on a high-powered flashlight attached to the barrel and swept the beam into the stall. The light hit the corner, illuminating a pile of old burlap sacks. There, pressed against the rotting wood, was the creature. Beavis gasped. Lord Almighty. It was hideous to behold. It was large, yes, but not because of muscle. Its body was swollen, distorted. Its fur was patchy, with great swathes of raw pink skin exposed to the cold air. One ear was tattered, and its face was a map of scars. It hissed, baring teeth that looked too big for its jaw. Dr. Lena lowered the rifle slightly, squinting. She took a step closer, disregarding her own safety protocols. As the beam of light focused, the color drained from her face. She turned pale, her hand trembling slightly as she lowered the gun completely. "Doctor?" Beavis asked, his heart hammering. "What is it? Is it rabid?" "It's not a mountain lion, Beavis," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper, thick with sudden emotion. "It's a bobcat, but I've never seen one like this." "A bobcat? It's huge." Lena corrected. She looked at Beavis, her eyes wide with shock and pity. "She is suffering from a severe case of mange, which is why she looks so strange and hairless. The swelling, the distortion." Lena swallowed hard. "Mr. Miller, she's not just fat. She is heavily pregnant, and she's deformed." Beavis squinted. "Deformed?" "Look at her front legs," Lena pointed. "It's a congenital defect, or maybe an old injury that healed wrong. She's bow-legged and crippled. She can't hunt. She can barely walk." The realization washed over Beavis. The lurking monster wasn't stalking him. It wasn't looking for children to eat. It was a crippled, sick mother, dying of hunger and cold, looking for a place to lie down and bring her babies into the world. The fear that had gripped Beavis's heart for 3 days evaporated, replaced instantly by a profound, aching sadness. He looked at the animal again. He didn't see a beast anymore. He saw eyes that were wide with panic, mirroring the loneliness he felt in his own empty house. "She came here for help," Beavis whispered. "She came here to die," Lena said softly. "She's likely starving. The mange lowers her immune system. Giving birth in this condition, she probably won't survive it. The standard protocol here, Mr. Miller, is euthanasia, to end the suffering." Beavis looked at the vet. He looked at the trembling creature in the corner, who had stopped growling and was now just watching them, defeated. "No," Beavis said. The word came out stronger than he intended. Lena looked at him. "Mr. Miller, it's going to be messy. It's risky. She's a wild animal." "She's a mother," Beavis said, his voice cracking. "And this is my barn, my Martha. She never turned away a stray cat in 40 years of marriage. If I let you shoot that poor thing while she's carrying babies, I'll never be able to look at Martha's picture again." Lena stared at him for a long moment. Then, a small, determined smile touched her lips. The color began to return to her face. She engaged the safety on her rifle and set it down against a post. "Okay," Lena said. "Okay, then we have work to do. We need to make this a quarantine zone. We need blankets, clean water, and food. High-protein wet food, now." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity that Beavis hadn't experienced in years. The lethargy of his grief was pushed aside by the urgency of the mission. He ran to the house, stripping the linen closet of his oldest, softest towels. He fired up the wood stove in the tack room adjacent to the stall to raise the ambient temperature of the barn. Kendi called around 6 o'clock. "Beavis, the town is gathering at the fire hall. People are talking about forming a hunting party. Did the DNR get the lion?" Beavis held the phone tight. "You tell them to stay away, Kendi. The DNR is here. The situation is under control. Tell them the area is contained. But if anyone sets foot on my property with a gun, they'll answer to me." He hung up before Kendi could ask questions. Back in the barn, Lena had managed to administer a sedative dart, a mild dose, just enough to calm the bobcat without harming the kittens. The animal, whom Beavis had mentally started calling Hope, was sleeping fitfully. Lena was able to apply a topical treatment for the mange and check the fetal heart rates with a portable Doppler. "Fast," Lena said, listening to the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh coming from the device. "But strong. She's going into labor, Beavis. The stress of us being here triggered it." Outside, the wind picked up. A storm was brewing, lashing rain against the tin roof of the barn. It felt like the world was closing in, isolating the three of them in that circle of warm light. Beavis sat on a hay bale watching Lena work. "You think she knows?" he asked. "That we're trying to help?" "Animals know intent," Lena said softly, arranging her surgical kit. "She knows she's warm. She knows she's not being chased. That's more than she's had in a long time." Around midnight, the labor began in earnest. The sedative had worn off and Hope woke up. She didn't try to attack. She was too busy with the ancient, consuming work of birth. She panted, her deformed body shuddering with contractions. It was heart-wrenching to watch. Every movement seemed to cause her pain in her disjointed hips. Beavis found himself holding his breath, his hands clasped together in prayer, something he hadn't done since the night Martha died. "Come on, girl," he whispered. "You can do it." The first kitten arrived at 12:30 a.m. It was tiny, wet, and spotting. Lena moved in quickly, checking the sack. "He's breathing," she announced. Over the next 2 hours, 3 more followed. But the mother was fading. Her breathing was shallow. She lay on her side, barely licking the newborns. The mange had taken so much out of her, and the effort of birth was the final blow. "She's crashing," Lena said, her voice tight. She reached for a syringe of glucose and fluids. "Hold the flashlight steady, Beavis." Beavis leaned over the stall gate, the light trembling in his hands. He watched as the vet fought for the life of a creature that most of the town wanted dead. He saw the tenderness in Lena's hands. He looked at the bobcat's face, the scars, the hairless patches, and he saw a beauty there that defied explanation. It was the beauty of endurance. "Don't you leave them," Beavis told the cat sternly. "You fought this hard to get here. You don't quit now." Maybe it was the fluids. Maybe it was the warmth of the barn. Or maybe it was simply the stubborn will of a mother. But as the storm outside began to break, Hope lifted her head. She gave a low, raspy mewl and began to groom the kitten closest to her nose. Lena let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "She's back. She's stabilizing." Beavis slumped against the barn wall, exhausted, tears tracking through the dust on his cheeks. He felt a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The sun rose on Halloween morning, bright and clear. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean. The town of Miller's Creek was still on edge. The rumors of the monster had not abated. In fact, because Beavis hadn't reported the kill, people were more anxious. At 10 a.m., a convoy of cars pulled up to Beavis's gate. It was Kendi, followed by the sheriff and a half-dozen concerned neighbors. They stayed by their cars, looking toward the house nervously. Beavis walked out onto the porch. He looked tired, his clothes wrinkled, but he stood straighter than he had in a long time. Dr. Lena stood beside him, looking equally exhausted but smiling. "Beavis," the sheriff called out, hand resting near his holster. "Everything all right? We didn't hear from you? Is it gone?" Beavis walked down the porch steps and approached the gate. He looked at his neighbors, people he had known for decades, people he had pulled away from in his grief. "There is no lion," Beavis said clearly, his voice carrying in the morning air. "But you said," Kendi started. "I said there was a beast," Beavis interrupted. "I was wrong. There was just a neighbor in need." The crowd murmured, confused. "Come on." Beavis waved them forward. "Quietly. And leave your guns in the cars." Hesitantly, the group followed Beavis and Dr. Lena to the barn. They stepped into the dim warmth, the smell of hay and antiseptic hanging in the air. Beavis led them to the stall at the end. "Look," he whispered. Anna Kendi, the sheriff, and the neighbors peered over the gate. There, nestled in a bed of premium straw and Beavis's best monogrammed towels, was the bobcat. She was sleeping deeply. Curled against her belly were 4 tiny spotted balls of fur nursing contentedly. The monster looked small now. The disfigurement of her legs was visible, as was the patchiness of her fur. But in the soft light, she didn't look grotesque. She looked peaceful. "It's a bobcat," Mrs. Gable whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, the poor thing, look at her scars." "She's been through hell," Dr. Lena said softly to the group. "She has a birth defect and severe mange. She was looking for a safe place to give birth. If Mr. Miller hadn't spotted her, and if he hadn't let me treat her, she and these kittens would be dead in the woods right now." The sheriff took off his hat, scratching his head. "So, no child-eating lion?" "Just a mother trying to survive," Beavis said. He looked at Kendi. "You can tell the kids to trick or treat. The only thing dangerous in this barn is how cute those kittens are." A ripple of laughter went through the group, breaking the tension. The fear evaporated, replaced by that universal human reaction to new life. "What happens now?" Kendi asked. "I'm taking them to the sanctuary center this afternoon," Lena explained. "The mother, Beavis named her Hope, needs extensive medical treatment. She'll never be released back into the wild. Her legs are too bad, but she'll live a good life in our enclosure. And the kittens, once they're weaned and raised with limited human contact, they'll be released back into the mountains where they belong." Beavis reached over the gate and lightly touched the tip of the sleeping mother's ear. She didn't flinch. "You'll keep me updated?" Beavis asked Lena. "You can visit whenever you want, Beavis," she smiled. "You're the godfather, after all." That evening, Halloween night, the atmosphere in Miller's Creek was different. The dread was gone. In its place was a story that was already being woven into the local lore. Not the story of the beast of Miller's Creek, but the legend of Beavis and the bobcat. Kids in costumes ran up and down the road. When they reached Beavis's driveway, they didn't run past in fear. Beavis sat on his porch in his rocking chair. He had a bowl of candy on the table beside him. The first time he'd bought candy in 3 years. A group of kids dressed as superheroes and ghosts timidly walked up the drive. "Trick or treat," they chorused. Beavis smiled, dropping chocolate bars into their plastic pumpkins. "Mr. Beavis?" a little girl dressed as a witch asked. "Is it true you saved a tiger?" Beavis chuckled, a warm, rusty sound. "Not a tiger, sweetheart. Just a bobcat, a special one. My dad said she was a monster, but then she turned into a mommy," the girl said seriously. "That's right," Beavis nodded, looking out toward the dark outline of his barn. "Sometimes things look scary because we don't understand them. And sometimes they just look scary because they're hurting." As the kids ran off giggling into the night, Beavis leaned back in his chair. The house behind him didn't feel quite so empty. The barn didn't feel quite so hollow. He looked up at the moon, and for the first time since Martha had passed, he didn't feel like he was just waiting out the clock. He had saved a life today. 4 lives, actually. He took a sip of his coffee, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. Tomorrow, he decided, he would go to the sanctuary to see Hope. And maybe, on the way back, he'd stop at Kendy's for a long chat. The winter was coming, but for the first time in a long time, Beavis Miller wasn't afraid of the cold. He knew that even in the darkest woods and the coldest nights, life found a way to endure. And as long as there was life, there was reason to keep the lights on.